Our camera's on and everything, we're all happy. Okay, and tell me when you're ready.
I'm
Yeah?
running. Yeah.
So today I'm going to be talking about what makes an effective use of special effects. To start off, I felt like I had to ask the simple question of what is special effects? And as it says in the dictionary there, which I thought was probably the best source for it, because of the part of the language, it defines it as an illusion created for films or television using props, camera work, or computer graphics. So special effects started around the 1890s, not long after filmmaking really began. The first use of special effects was as simple as stopping the camera. So stopping it rolling and then replacing something in the shot with a dummy. So the first one in that picture there is the beheading of Queen Mary, the Queen of the Scots, who in that they simply showed her walking up, lying down, putting her head on the stool, pausing the camera, placing it with a dummy, and then beheading the dummy. And then a few years later, there was a slow progression, and in 1926 there was then the introduction of rear projection, which this man here, Ray Harryhausen, used a lot of, and he helped to change a lot of the films we see today. I will talk more about him in a second. And rear projection allowed him to film actors in a certain scene or setting, and then project them onto a wall from behind, and then use models to then have the models interacting with the actors, so that he could then create a film with with creatures that don't exist as models interacting with the actors, or looking like they're interacting with the actors. And then in 1973 then came the introduction of CGI with computer generated image. So in the bottom corner there, the film Westworld. That was the first use of CGI, but that was 2D. Later on, 3 years later, came the use of 3D CGI, which was in the film Future World. Special effects have changed a lot, and for me to be able to get a very good understanding of it, I looked at 2 films, both the Clash of the Titans films, the 1981 one and the 2010 one. And I did this because both of them include the same sort of animals and creatures that aren't real. And within this, it helped me get a very good idea to see which one looked better and which one was more effective. So, 1981 one, Clash of the Titans, was the one with Ray Harryhausen, where he used the models interacting with the actors, so that so he then used the rear projection. The creatures were designed with the latex and made to look as real as possible, to look like they're real and match the actors, so that in that film they looked very real, because they were in a sense real. They were created, they were there physically. But then if you look at the Clash of the Titans in 2010, that film was good and it was effective, but they used a lot more CGI. And for some of the creatures in it, it didn't look right, because you could tell they were CGI, and it took you out of that suspension of disbelief. So you can see the way it's changed. They kind of cut corners with, instead of making practical effects and using those, it kind of takes away that. So you then end up watching a film and you can kind of get thrown out of the film because of some poor CGI. So over time it's changed from being practical to being a lot more CGI. When it really flipped, when it really turned, when special effects probably was at its peak of changing, was with this man here, who I already mentioned, Ray Harryhausen. And he is someone that has actually influenced a lot of films we see today, such as the Pirates of the Caribbean films, Wallace and Gromit. They all came along and were inspired. A lot of the scenes in those were actually inspired by Ray Harryhausen, with the way he used latex models to interact with actors that are actually there, which helped to create this illusion to trick the person watching into thinking they're real, because in a sense they were. But these films like Wallace and Gromit were real, they were models, real models, but they would move very slowly and don't actually have a personality. They have a personality in a sense, but they aren't actually there. They aren't something you can properly talk to. But because of slowly creating them and moving them and all this, you then create an illusion and you feel enticed into it and you're not watching it. Which, for special effects, is very good because it's not there, it's not actually real, but because of the way you sort of altered it, you bring people into a suspension of disbelief. And so a lot of the fight scenes that he created for interaction with like skeletons, like how Jack Sparrow turned into one, he kind of created that idea of having human beings interacting with creatures that aren't actually there. Special effects has changed a lot of the films we see today. So, and one person I sort of watched this documentary on was Spielberg. He spoke a lot about how a lot of the films he makes today, and a lot of the big films he's made, and a lot of the other big films that have been made that work very well, use a lot of special effects and you don't necessarily notice them. Because some of them can just be with, you could just have almost like a dock in a film, and the only thing in that that's real in that is the wooden dock. The rest of it could just be CGI. So he said for that, it's made it easier because you can sometimes save money if you're travelling around the world, bring those people with you. But also you can just do the simplest things and make people believe that it's real. But he's very happy because, like, one of his big films, Jurassic World, is that wouldn't have been able to happen without use of CGI, without use of special effects. Because dinosaurs obviously are extinct, you can't then go get a dinosaur and make it chase people in a car. You just have to deal with what you've got. So he was very lucky because he was part of the special effects era where it changed it up in CGI, where they were able to make creatures really there, make them appear, but they were all on a computer. So you fell into suspension of disbelief from something that's just digitally done. Do we need special effects for the films we see today? For some of the films we see today, we do, such as the Transformers franchise. That wouldn't be able to be done with the use of practical effects. There's too many tiny little bits of detail and things that aren't from this world that you can't create with little models, because there's little cogs and small pieces of them as they transform that you just can't mimic with a little model. So from the practical effects side, there are films we can't use them for. CGI, on the other hand, brings them to life. Most of the main characters in those films aren't actually there. They are big robots that just, you can't make, they're just too intricate. Another question is CGI, or special effects, helping or hindering the films we see today? So like the film in the top right, Shark Boy and Lava Girl, that is, yes, it's a kid's film, but at the same time, the CGI used within that is very poor. For someone that is grown up watching it, you would question it a lot. You would think, what was the budget on this? It's very poorly made, it's not clear, it's very... You're not brought into that suspension of disbelief, you kind of just sit there and you kind of criticise it throughout. But on the other hand, the film Avatar, one of the most expensive films to make out there, also one of the highest rated films that we've seen. Most of it is 90% of it is CGI, if not more, because it's set on a world in a universe that just could not exist. Most of it isn't even set on, all of it isn't set on Earth. It is set on this foreign planet where everything is 10 times bigger than it should be. Animals that don't exist, even the people that inhabit it don't exist. So they needed as much CGI as they could and relied on it to make that come to life. But because the film also starts off with CGI in it, you fall straight into that suspension of disbelief. With Shark Boy and Lava Girl, there's parts of it at the start where it's just a normal boy in a classroom, and then it cuts to these two people that can't exist. They're not really there, and there's this whole dream world that couldn't happen, that shouldn't happen. But because the CGI is so poor, you don't fall into that suspension of disbelief. So, like this does, like I say here, CGI can help or hinder a film. So, Venom came out recently, a few months ago. There is a symbiote in that is not real, that can't exist due to the nature of it is it's inside someone. It uses them as a kind of, as a host, and then it can come out and create an armour, which is what that is there. And that can't happen with practical effects. You can't just kind of have someone stood there, then suddenly it's coming out of their skin, all this ooze and that. You wouldn't be able to do that properly. So with it introducing that straight away at the start of the film, you fall into that suspension of disbelief. You put the fact that it's CGI, you think, oh, this is what I'm expecting throughout the rest of the film, there to be more CGI. But like this Poirot film with John Malkovich that came out recently, it's a very serious, gritty film that's based in the past, but it's about, obviously, Poirot as a detective. He is working a case, and the whole film is very real. There's no CGI in it. To the very end, where he's running between two trains, and the CGI is so poor, it throws you out that suspension of disbelief. It can ruin the film for you. So sometimes it can help, sometimes it can, well, hinder it. But what makes an effective use of special effects is my main question. And from the research I've done, I feel like I can easily say, to be able to tell if it's an effective use of special effects would be if you can watch the film, the special effects don't throw you out of suspension of disbelief. If it throws you out of the film, the effects have been done poorly. If you can carry on watching that film and you don't think about the effects, it's been done properly and it's been done effectively. For example, in the Harry Potter films, from the first film to the final film, you know that there's things within that aren't real. It's wizards, it's wizardry, it's tricks, it's kind of magic that you know isn't a real type of magic. So for someone to not have a nose, you have to use special effects, and in that it was done properly. You can the effects of it, you don't kind of think, oh, he's not got a nose, but that's clearly CGI'd out. It's been done properly and it's made effective, so you don't notice it. Whereas in other films, such as the San Andreas film, CGI of a tsunami hitting the Golden Gate Bridge is done poorly, and it throws you out of the suspension of disbelief. That's it. Any questions?
I was like, no, there's not two questions. That was really good, Joe. Well done.
Thank you.
That was really well rehearsed and planned.